One of the biggest opportunities to lower your scores when you're out on the golf course has to be when you're on the greens. And there's three main skills that we look to develop when we're putting. And in this video, I'm going to show you the most important. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Kerrod Gray here. Today on the putting green, and I'm going to show you the number one skill that you need to develop to hole more putts. There's three of them. We've got start line control, we've got distance control, and we've got green reading. And in today's lesson, I'm going to show you a very simple, easy to follow process to determine in which direction the ball's going to break and if it's going to break a little or a lot. This is the premise for most green reading systems, and it's one of the easiest that you can implement straight away into your routine and help you hole some more putts. But before we get into it, if you haven't already, please go down below, click subscribe, click that little bell so you get notified of all the great content coming your way. And if you're looking for something a little bit more personalized, I can do online swing analysis. I have a premium video library over on my website on kggolf.com. So if you're looking for something a little bit more involved that can help you upgrade the quality of your ball striking, your chipping, your putting, well, you can head over down below and you can click the links and then learn more about what to do from there. But once again, in today's session, we are talking about green reading. I see a lot of players not spend enough time actually assessing what the ball is going to do before they even get to it. They pull their putter out, they step up to it, they aim straight, and as a result, they end up three putting far too often and more often than they'd like. So I'm going to show you a great process. This is something that I myself follow. It's something that a lot of PGA Tour players and caddies simply go through, this very quick, easy to follow system that gives you a better understanding of exactly which direction the ball's going to break and if it's going to break a little or a lot. Now, when it comes to good green reading, it's really about taking in as much information as possible. That means shifting your perspective. That means having an understanding of the undulations that your ball is going to roll across. But there's a few habits that I see players form that aren't beneficial to encouraging them to read the greens correctly and therefore lead to some more putts than they would like. Now, one of the biggest faults that I see players make is they generally underread putts, and as a result, they hit the ball too hard to compensate. Now, before we get into the process, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about an understanding of distance control. And one thing to consider is most players three putt because they're trying to hit the ball into the hole. They're trying to create too much speed. They're trying to keep the ball straight, hit the back, a nice, firm, positive putt. So your buddies say, well, at least you didn't leave it short. But that unfortunately leads to a lot of three putts. So a simple shift in mindset can sometimes make a huge difference to your putting in itself. If you think about the hole as a disc that you want your ball stopping on, rather than a hole that you want your ball going in, well, that can make a massive difference to your ability to control the speed of the ball. Now, your objective in golf is to get the ball as close to the hole as possible. And yes, ideally it's going to go in. But if it misses, we want to ensure that we've got a little putt just tapping that thing in rather than a little knee knocker over about 3 or 4 foot, because you do that for consecutive holes. Sure, they might be positive putts, but before you get to the end of the round, you're going to be exhausted because you're going to be concentrating so much on those short putts, and more than likely, you're going to miss them. Now, what we see with the PGA professional, expectation-wise, is they hole about 50% of putts from 8 foot. We've got a putt here of just over about 6 foot here. But the shorter ones, the ones where most amateur golfers miss and they get nervous, PGA professionals are very, very good at holing those on a consistent basis. So as recreational golfers, if we can eliminate those three putts, get the ball as close to the hole as possible so we don't give ourselves those little knee knockers on the way back, well, that will help a lot in lowering those scores. So let's talk about this green reading process. And the reason that we're going to cover green reading and not the other two skills in this video is green reading precedes everything else. Before we even get to our putt, we need to assess the land. We need to have an understanding of the severity of the slope and which direction that ball is going to roll. Sure, we do have an understanding that we want to leave the ball as close to the hole as possible, but we don't have to critically think about stroke length and how hard to hit it until we've determined how much the putt is going to break. So green reading is the very first skill that you actually need to improve to ensure that you're giving yourself the best chance of holding some more putts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you through a little routine that I follow, and I've got some sticks here, and this is just going to highlight the simplicity of this process. So what we've got here is a putt just over about 6 foot, and as we can see from the undulation of the slope, this would be the high side and this would be the low side. And really what you want to go through this process is the very first thing you want to do is you want to figure out the high point and the low point. The easiest way to go about this is imagine you had a glass of water, tip the green, and whatever direction that water flowed, well, that would be the high point and the low point. Alternatively, there's many players that simply just stand here on the side slope, close their eyes, and get a feeling of which foot has the most amount of pressure. That'll give you a good understanding of the high side and the low side. So in this instance, this is the high side and this is the low side. Now, don't get distracted by all these undulations surrounding, because sometimes that can really skew your perspective of what the ball is going to do from point A to point B. So what do we do after we've determined the high point and the low point? Well, the next thing that we do is we walk on that low side and we find what is called the straight uphill putt. So a straight uphill putt is a putt of about 6 foot where I think this ball is going to roll directly straight up the hill. And I'm going to place this white stick down on the ground here as a reference for that. Now, I've picked that spot simply from as I was walking from behind the ball. I know that's the high side, that's the low side, and I was walking around in this direction. What I'm doing is I'm assessing this ground right here. I'm going, okay, I still feel like that's right to left, that's right to left. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk all the way around here until I can see it is left to right. And then I get closer and I go, okay, well, I think this is straight uphill. Now, it doesn't have to be precise. It really doesn't. Close enough is good enough in this instance. You don't need to be perfect with it. It's all about shifting your perspective. Now, I see a lot of players waste too much time on the high side over there and behind the hole. Really, when you think about it, the number one angle, or the most important angle that you actually need to assess, is the straight uphill putt. A very simple analogy I like to use is imagine my hand right here. Well, this is a mountain range. And if you're in an aeroplane and flying over the top of that mountain range, well, you don't get a true perspective of the severity of the mountains. Same thing as if you were going to come from the other side, it effectively looks the same. And like I said at the beginning, good green reading is all about shifting your perspective. But if we were to stand on the side of the mountain range, well, now we can get a true scope of how tall that actually is. And we can do the same thing here for putting. When I stand on top of that putt, my eyes are only seeing one severity of slope. I'm not getting a full picture or perspective of how steep that slope actually is. So by walking down here, straight uphill putt, and I scan my eyes now across it, well, this starts to take in more information and give me a better understanding of how severe this putt actually would be. So once we've identified this straight uphill putt, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to come on the other side and we're going to break this into its most simplistic form, and we're going to place the stick here. Now this right here, well, this would be the straight downhill putt. If that's the straight uphill, that is the straight downhill. So what we've done is we've divided this putt now into two different sections. Everything that breaks from left to right and everything that breaks from right to left. Now we're actually going to take it another step further. We're going to place these orange sticks down and we're going to place these at 90 degrees to those sticks there. And what this does is this now divides our putt up into quadrants. And very simply put, in this quadrant here, this is an uphill right to left putt. That is a downhill right to left putt. Over there, well, that's a downhill left to right, and that is an uphill left to right. So then based on that, seeing as my golf ball is just here, we start to get a better understanding, once again, after we've shifted our perspective, of exactly in which direction the ball's going to break, and if it's going to break a little or a lot. So if I'm standing here and this is straight uphill, if my ball was here, for example, it is only going to break a little. It's going to break a little bit more, and for simplicity's sakes, if you were on that orange stick over there, you would say that that is going to break the most right to left. Now, yes, it is a little bit downhill and all these other factors can certainly contribute to it breaking a little bit more or less if you're slightly on the other side. But what we're doing here is we're just simplifying this whole process to ensure that we've got a set routine to follow. Now, you don't need to get too caught up in the nuances from putt to putt and get overcomplicated in the way that you project this information, because it's only just going to encourage you to spend more time over the ball than necessary and eventually miss more putts. So what we want to do is we want to make this very streamlined and easy, especially so we're not holding up the groups behind us. So what you're going to do is you're going to stand behind. You initially figure out where the high point and the low point is. You then from there, you assess, is it a severe slope or a gentle slope? and how far away from the straight putt it is. So right here, I actually think that's quite a severe slope. So what that means to me is now I've taken in more information. I've got a better understanding that right here, that I feel that this is more break than when I originally stood over the ball and considered how much this putt was going to break. So like I said before, at this stage, you don't need to quantify how much this ball is going to break. Simply just having an understanding and shifting your perspective can help you get a better sort of feel of how much this ball is going to break. Then from there, once you've stood behind the putt, now you've got a better understanding of exactly where to aim. So for example, on this putt right here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to move that stick out of the way because I know that it's close to the 90-degree angle. Now, as a general rule of thumb, what most players do is they underread and overhit. So taking into account what I just assessed there, I'm just going to allow a little bit more break than I think. Now, for this sort of putt, you'll be surprised, that most players are, is how much putts actually break. So I'm going to aim way out over in this direction here, and I'm just going to get a feel for this. And that's going to be about where my actual aim point is. Now, when I make my practice strokes, I'm aligning myself to that, but I'm actually looking at the cup. From there, all I'm trying to do is hit the ball about the distance of the cup. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm not necessarily too concerned about ensuring. So you can see that was a little bit too hard. And it went past and it's finished maybe about a foot past. No, my read was pretty reasonable. A little bit too much speed, but that's certainly not a putt that I'm worried about on the way back. Now remember, this is all expectations. You might feel like you're expected to hole putts at this length, but you're not actually. As long as you leave the ball as close as possible to the hole, you've got a better chance. And this little green reading process, this is just the first stage of it, gives you a better understanding in which direction the putt's gonna break and if it's gonna break a little or a lot. So use this next time you're out on the course. Spend a couple of minutes just assessing the high side and the low side before you get to the ball. You don't need to spend too much time when you're over the ball. And then from there, figure out if it's going to break a little or a lot. Aim a little bit more than you expect. Work on hitting at the speed of the cup, so trying to leave your ball as close to the hole as possible. And I'm sure it will help you leave that ball closer to the hole more often than not and help you reduce the amount of three putts you're having as a result. So I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you've got any questions at all, please ask me below. But until next time, I'm Kerrod Gray. Thanks for watching.